Recording stopped.
All right, so today is September 12th, 2021, and we're going to continue our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati. Where would everyone like to start? I know a lot has gone on, and I just want to say it's the day after the September 11 attack 20 years ago. So, yeah, just wanted to say that.
Can everybody mute who's not actually speaking?
Can I just make a brief thing I just wanted to say was that Petra sent a message to some of us, and she can't come to the meetings because of the misfortune of the shape of the planet. But she just said that she's here, she's with us in spirit. So I just wanted to acknowledge her message.
Yeah, she mentioned about Alison as well. She's going to try to contact her.
And I have only one thing to say as a response to what we talked about last week, is I've looked into the possibility of Faulty and Chris Hedges meeting with young people, and it seems like it all revolves all right around the probation officers who hold the keys to associations and contact with these people. So I've got an awful lot of information about different probation officers and different offices in the UK and Wales. So I just was going to hold on to it, and or else I can send it to you if you want to pass it on to Faulty, or I don't know. Just let me know, because otherwise I come to a dead end, because I can't explain to any associations anything, you see. So it will have to come from the people who want to meet with the people. So I think that the trail of the probation officers might be the best.
So you can't call them and ask them if it's possible?
Yeah,
set up with you?
I was going to email, but then I was thinking, what am I going to say? Who am I to say that these two famous people are going to come down to, I wanted to have a kind of a bit of a backup for that, and say, well, give a bit more body to my request, basically.
Oh, I mean, I would just say that it's XR wants to talk to them about climate change. Can they do it? Protest climate change, civil disobedience. Just, I think that that's a necessary step to just make sure they don't So not on your life. We're trying to teach these kids to join AA and be good Protestants, Catholics, whatever.
I didn't want to
are
go
you
down
mute?
the road of any church because I didn't want to, because I had some contacts through them and I just didn't want to go down through them. I thought it was not really, it was going to just, so I think I'm going to start with I've got a list of 5 or 6 probation officers who are in a post of responsibility, and they might be able to dispatch me to different offices just with that message. That's what I needed. I'll do that now and I'll keep you posted. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean approach the churches. I just thought that maybe they, they're not open to it because they have some other agenda. But I think we should just find that out, just see what they will permit. Yeah, so things are going really slow on my side. We're waiting for Blondie to get back on the closing ceremony stuff, and I haven't heard from her in a week, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. And then, yeah, I also asked about the Extinction Rebellion sub, and didn't hear anything back from that apart from Faulty said, yeah, well, they're pretty freaking useless, and Reddit's a kind of write-off anyway. So anyway, not much joy over there, and I think that the IB rebellion is supposed to start now on tomorrow. So that was the date, but I can't find anything about it. So I'm going to kind of watch the news and see. But anyway, it's slow my end. Yeah, I haven't been getting much traction.
Yeah, on my end, I haven't heard back from Spencer, so I might have to I'll follow up with them. And then the other contacts, the other art directors haven't replied back to me, so I'm back to square one. The only thing I'll say is Max, DGR. They're kind of in the background, so I don't know. They're just open for interviews or if you want to get their input, but they're also busy with their own projects. But if we do want to talk to them, they're available for that. But that's all I have.
Actually, that would be nice to talk to them. Which, all 3 of them, or?
Well, as far as I know, Max, he's the most available. I can reach out to Derek. Seems like at the time he was free October, but he might be free later in the months. And Lier hasn't replied back. So I think our best bet right now is Max, and then Derek. So would it?
Yeah,
Should we start just seeing if they're having a follow-up interview with them? Would that be good?
Yeah, I think that'd be nice. Just to tell them progress and ask them, for their input.
Yeah, great. I'll follow up and see when they're available.
And then that other woman that Gary mentioned, I watched that video about, and she seemed quite clued up. What was her name, Gary?
I'm sorry, Sophie's. I can't think of it now. Sophie's, but we were just talking about it. Hugh, I never managed to see the entire video. The second half, I couldn't play it past about 3/4 of an hour, and that was the part with the transhumanism. I think she was Sophie's watching it at the moment, but I was more or less recommending this woman on the basis of what I thought she might have been going to say rather than the fact that I actually heard it. But she does seem promising. Did you hear the whole thing? Have you got did it play? It just wouldn't play properly. What?
Yeah, she's like fought lawsuits and stuff.
I felt that she sounded to me as though she would have significant overlap with Alison. And that was why I felt enthusiastic about her, that's all.
Yeah, she looked good to me. I think we should try and get hold of her. Try getting an interview with her. She seemed a little more grounded, like she was actually going to fight, rather than just do dandelions.
That's what I thought. She seemed sort of much more sort of forthright. What was her name again, Sophie? I've forgotten what her name is. Fitz something, wasn't it?
Catherine Attis.
Yeah, Catherine Austin Fitz, F-I-T-T-S.
Sorry, I thought it was Catherine. Yeah. Catherine Austin Fitz. Yes, sorry.
That's it. Yeah.
And she seems to be very, very clued in and to have worked and evolved into a lot of areas that would be very interesting to ask her about. And but I haven't finished watching the video.
That's on a place called Gumshoe News. They've got that video should be there on their
I'll put it in the comments.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay. That would be great, actually. If she
everything seems to be going well.
That would be great if she is worth. If we might be able to just sort of make a bit more meaningful progress with her rather than bothering off Alison.
She used to be an assistant secretary at HUD, which is the Housing and Urban Development. So she knows a lot about, I think, the real estate, activities. So, and she seems to know a lot about financial matters, financial behind the scenes scams or activities.
Well, what I got from the first part of the video that I highlighted and I emailed that to you, Gary, is that she said, if you want to understand about Wall Street and the general running of things in America, all you need to do is watch The Godfather 1, 2, and 3. So I thought that's spot on.
Yeah, I posted something on South Africa, and that thing in South Africa is, it's not just South Africa. South Africa is just kind of mimicking what's happening in every country. So what you see there in South Africa is kind of a magnifying glass. You get a better picture in like an African country than you do in, say, America. But what's going on in America is exactly the same as what the Guptas have done. So, they just small-time mimics. The Guptas are just small-time mimics of what's happening in the rest of the world with, the Gateses and Musks and all these big names. They're doing exactly the same thing on just a vaster scale. But it kind of gets exposed in a place like South Africa, so you can see what's happening, but what's going on there is absolutely the same as what's going on everywhere else, and it's just going to get worse where as collapse comes. But I think people struggle to, especially liberals, so they struggle to imagine that countries can actually be hijacked, but almost all the countries in all the Western democracies have been hijacked by these very influential financiers. And you can see it in South Africa. It's just beggars belief, but they just imitate us. They're not originators. So it's worth watching that thing to get a clue about what's going on in America.
Is this a post you put up? Is it that you're referring to?
Yeah, I just put it up now. It's a Deutsche Welt thing about the corruption in South Africa, but you see, that's asset stripping that the Guptas did with politicians. That creates, structural problems, and they can't keep the power going in South Africa because people have just been raiding the piggy bank. And so there's been no investment in infrastructure, and the power keeps on going off. And when the power keeps on going off, it has tremendous, downstream repercussions. Everything from like refrigeration and stuff going bad to the crime and can't pump gas, and so tremendous impacts of not having continuous power. But they're in a death spiral, because when you get to that stage, the fact that they have intermittent power means that companies leave, and so it just gets worse and worse. They struggle to raise more taxes, and then you can see Zuma now. They finished that documentary with Zuma being sentenced for contempt of court. They didn't include what happened after that, and that's the Zuma's people just whipped everybody up. It was exactly like The Godfather. They basically just whipped everybody up into looting, rioting frenzy, and just wiped out the whole of Natal, just for the sake of politics. Just exactly like Trump. Like Trump, sent all these goons to invade the Capitol. Zuma did the same thing. He was mimicking Trump. So all those guys, they are billionaires, so they have access to all these other billionaires like Bill Gates and that everybody doesn't know is corrupt. And so they kind of like junior cousins. They were emulating, the big guys. And then it looks like, oh, South Africa's really going to cede, and say, no, those are just the bit players that are trying to, mimic their mates that they meet in Dubai and places like that. So you just get a peek behind the curtain in South Africa about how it is in Britain and America, but people can't see it. They see places like Toys R Us and all these kind of institutional old companies go bust, and those are raids. Those are raids by BlackRock and Vanguard, State Street. They raid them and they destroy them with debt. And exactly what they've done to South Africa is they're just, just done these mega projects like 87 billion for atomic energy from Russia, which they don't need. And then they just ladle the country with debt till it breaks. And that's happening, in Britain, it's happening in America. So when you see Biden doing like $9 trillion of infrastructure spending, he's doing exactly the same thing as Zuma is doing. It's slightly more sophisticated, but it's the same guys behind it. KPMG and all the guys, Deloitte and Touche, all the guys that actually do the auditing. Those guys are, they instruct you. Zuma and Guptas and that, they're not smart enough to come up with those schemes on their own. It's the big corporations like KPMG that are instructing them and telling them, hey, this is what all the other big guys do. We'll help you do it. And so they're just bit players that are emulating the big ones. So it's harder to see that Biden is just Zuma, and that 9 trillion will go in corrupt financing, and America soon won't have the infrastructure, to keep the lights on, just like South Africa. That money will not be spent on real infrastructure builds in America. It will be spent on boondoggles, and the guys will do exactly what they did in South Africa. You see, the Guptas, they get an inside track on the policy. So then they know that, big nuclear projects are coming. So then they go and buy up all the uranium mines at Assam. And so, they're all ready for when it gets announced, then uranium mines go through the roof, and then they get an exclusive contract. And so it's all dirty as all hell. And that's how it is all over the world. But that's how collapse happens. It's as the store starts to cave in, everybody does a raid on it. So all the insiders are raiding. You see, that's what's happening to the developed world now. It's basically all the guys that know that it's in its last days, they're raiding the carcass. And the average guy, like Michael Moore or so, he doesn't realize that. He doesn't know enough about the financial industry and Wall Street. And so to him, it's all, kind of 1970s, and he's still like, our democracy, and, we must hold the corrupt politicians' feet to the fires as if there's some other sort. Still has this view that there were a few rotten apples, but otherwise the system is okay. And they don't see that the system is gone, and what these guys are just basically, raiding they're just looting the coffers of Rome as the city starts to burn. And the populace doesn't know that. They think Rome's still Rome, isn't it? No, they know that Rome's a burning hulk, and they're just taking the silk and heading out. And so, but people can't really see that. So I just posted that so that it gives you an idea of what's really going on all over the world. I mean, Brexit was part of this big raid. So, but people don't know that. They think Brexit was something to do with xenophobia. They say, no, it's to do with KPMG told them that basically they would do a lot better if they just separated from the EU regulation and they didn't have oversight. So it's basically the guards are corrupt, the overseer, just like in South Africa, eventually the police, the regulators, they're all in on it. And so they won't touch any of those guys. So anyway, watch that and you'll know what's happening in America, Britain, Europe, everywhere.
Well, Catherine Austin Fitz, she listened to the video that Gary sent and that I posted there, has a very interesting analysis on that. And for a non-American, I was not very surprised after what you have told us through the last while and what I've heard and read, but her analysis is also including the people themselves. She doesn't just say, okay, it's organized crime and the military, and she's also saying that the American people have a place to play in the scheme, and she analyzes that extremely well. And that was bring to my mind what we talked about quite a while ago at the beginning of our meetings about the debt strike. You remember when we were talking about accelerating collapse? It was before the COVID crisis, and there was a lot of discussions about how to organize it, even as only a threat, if not, in reality. And I was wondering, I don't know, I was thinking, are we going to come back there? Are we going to visit this again when we'll be a bit more implanted in American movement? I don't know. Has anybody got any thoughts about that strike?
Yeah. So it's coming on the 17th. So there's a global wildcat strike on the 17th, but there will be more and more strikes. You see, my idea was that you build up the organization. You basically have an organization that is tight and loyal, and then you can start doing these actions. But I'm not sure that other people agree with that. They think you kind of do, you do the actions and then other people come running out of the woodwork to join. But I think that it's not proving that way. If you look at those polls that I did, and somebody else has put a poll in, SurveyMonkey. So go and fill that in. But I think people are defecting away from action. They're not actually, it's not attracting action. What XR did now in these last 2 weeks, I think, has driven people away. They've got more alienated than ever. And so I saw Gail saying, well, it's kind of made everything kind of tight and only the dedicated people are, so sort of what I'm saying, but they're withering down. And so I'm thinking, you've got to start with that idea that you need a solid core and build up. But yeah, I'm not sure I'm making much headway with that argument. But anyway, just naturally, they're going to be strikes because labor power is going to be growing now. I think there was a sushi chain or something path. And so, you know, because people are pissed off, labor is pissed off, then they'll start doing more strikes. I would like people to get the notion of how powerful debt strikes are. In fact, those are the most powerful, is debt strikes. But I see that Gail she's got charged with bank fraud for, I think, is what she's charged with, and that's for doing the debt strike, for actually that I recommended actually. But they didn't implement it quite the way I said it, in the way she did it is actually fraud. But you see, the way I think to do all these things is to do them slowly. And so, you know, I thought you should do a nickel and dime debt strike. So everybody just does a token amount, and as that, when that gets broad appeal, then you start raising the amount. But you need to get people's toe in the water with the amount that's too little to prosecute. If you say, you know, I think the debt strike that Gail did, it's a mistake. You just basically get people that have creditworthiness and are prepared to cash it in, which implies retired people. But that's not what you want. You want the little guys at the bottom on a broad section to do a debt strike, and not a lot of people understand the debt system to know how devastating that is. But the whole system will come apart very, very quickly if there's even a retail debt strike. But particularly things like mortgage and car loans, student loans, each one of those could bring down the financial system. Student loans, I think, are about 1.6 trillion. But the reason why it works is there's so much leverage in these small debts. So if you default on $1, they have a $30 problem on the back end, because they're all, you know, doing side bets. The way to think of it is like a horse race. They have one, you know, you as a debt slave are a horse in a race, like an asker, and they all the punters. So the banks and the hedge funds and all these financiers, you know, so many financial institutions, the institutional money are side bets on this horse. And so, you know, up till now, the horses always ran the race, and then the guys collected, you know, on the back end. But imagine if the horses, halfway through the race, they just stand still. Then, you know, the guys that have like, you know, $30 on every dollar bet on the horse, on side bets. So that's a problem magnified, you know, 30 times. So I don't think people realize that. They don't realize, you know, how much impact their debts are doing. Because the debt, you see, the retail debtors, slaves like us have, that's not actually the meat and potatoes of the system. The meat and potatoes is all the derivatives on that. So it's basically what you're giving them by borrowing $1. You're giving them a license to bet. You're giving them a chip, which then they go and put on the tables at Wall Street, and that's just one huge casino. And I'm talking, you know, 1.5 quadrillion. Just, you know, 1,500 trillion is on the back end. That's the size of this casino. But what you're doing by defaulting on $1 is you're withdrawing the chips that they're using on this table. So then you have spectacular losses. But the average Joe, there are two problems. The average Joe, has not defected from the system yet, but they're getting there. And that's part of what these strikes are good for. So the strike on the 17th is good for, or the 15th, I think. No, 17th. That strike is good for training people. Training on the idea of defecting from the system. So it psychologically is good because it gets in breakaway. And that's why I think a penny debt, you know, basically just a nickel and dime default, a popular default for a very small token amount. The point of it is psychological, to get people to work against the system. So that's the other thing, and then educate them on how powerful the debt is. But it doesn't matter if you go and do a glue on a train or something. It's like you're completely wasting your time. You might as well go to the movies. But if you start monkeying with the financial instruments, Wall Street bets is probably having more impact than anything XR has ever done in their history. So, yeah, all the markets out of whack. They're all being manipulated. Everything from the LIBOR to the investments, trading funds, the ETFs, exchange traded funds, all the derivatives markets, they're all being massively manipulated. And even cryptocurrencies are being manipulated to hell. That's what we just saw. Like, I think Ecuador or whatever became, they allowed Bitcoin as part of the national currency, and Bitcoin immediately tanked. So yeah, they're manipulating all these things wildly, and that goes both ways. They can be caught in squeezes and that, but the public has to be, they have to withdraw their loyalty from the system, and then they have to be educated in the power that we actually have. But you see in that video about South Africa, then you see all the guys are a bit demoralized. They're a bit like us. It's like, oh, these forces are so powerful, and you can even expose them, and it does nothing. And but if they started a death strike, say against Zuma, that would have caught on like crazy, and they could take Zuma out of office. Well, he's out now, but they could have taken him out right at the point where they were most despondent, and all the newspapers, Guptas and everybody was exposed, and still nothing happened. That's how entrenched the corruption is. That even if everybody knows it's corrupt, even if you could have a court case tomorrow and win it, you can't bring these guys to court. They're untouchables, and that's a death actually touches them, because you see that there was an incident there where they got rid of the finance minister because he wouldn't basically go along with their corruption. He was an honest guy, so they got rid of him. The rand immediately went down 15%, and the country was hemorrhaging. The new corrupt minister, a crook that they put in there, he lasted 4 days. Then they had to reinstate the old guy, just the honest guy. And it shows you the power of finance. If you had a general strike in South Africa, or a debt strike more than a labor strike, you can bring the rand down 15%. You can bring a currency down 15% if it's broad enough, and that's an instant vote. They have to react on the nail. They have to react within days, hours, to correct their mistakes. See, once the population realizes that's where the action is, and that's where the leverage is, that's where the power is, then it'll become a thing. It'll become a new form of democracy where the population uses debt strike action to get instant results.
Can somebody can somebody, or you or anybody, but that strike on the 17th? Now I've looked at it on the website, and now I might be a bit tired today. I don't remember much, but is it only in the States or is it worldwide? And is it? I guess you don't hear about it except on our sub.
It's worldwide.
All right, because I haven't really heard a lot about that. Do you think there'll be a big following?
Yeah, it remains to be seen, but it doesn't matter if there is a big following or not. It's the shape of things to come. You see, people are starting to realize that we need to do this kind of stuff. You're going to see it coming more and more. So if this isn't the big one, it heralds the kind of thing people are going to start doing. But ultimately, you shouldn't forget that these guys are not dummies, and they know what's coming better than we do. So probably, or debt strikes and stuff, the ultimate result will be a great reset, a financial great reset, which is what they want. But, you know, we all, as the public, we're as dumb as pig shit. But you know, they would get their financial great reset. But while they do that financial great reset, they're terribly vulnerable, because if the financial system is in play and the whole that means our whole industrial civilization is in play. It means that it's not necessarily their vision that triumphs then. See, if there's a change and it's everybody realizes this is a whole new world, then, you know, there are a lot of competing views for how that world should be. And I think then they might have missed it. I think they might be a bit arrogant, that they think they can do the Klaus Schwab version, and they can dictate to us, you know, special drawing rights and you know, basically how the financial the restructuring of the global financial system, they assume will be done their way. I think they might have miscalculated, because the central banks are kind of drunk on their own power, and they might find that the people will say, no, we don't want your vision for the new world. And that they haven't calculated that. They haven't. I think they might have fucked up there. But anyway, the sooner the big, you know, collapse comes, the big financial reset comes, the better for everybody, for the oligarchs and for us. Especially the old system must die, and then we get to contend for the new system. But anyway, it's not a one-shot deal, right? So what history shows is, if you look at the assignats in France and the French Revolution, is you get many go-rounds. So even if you miss the first go-round, they could implement their vision, the WEF vision, and the special drawing as the SDR and all of that, the world's currency. It's basically Keynes's Bancorp. They might start with that, implement that, and then there's, you know, riots in the street and people are outraged at what happens next, because they can't really sweeten the public. See, they can't see, once there's hyperinflation and a restructuring of the financial system, which is, I don't see how that can be avoided. But when that comes, then you know, there's it's you know, it's not guaranteed which way it'll play then, because they can't sweeten, they don't have incentives to sweeten the public. So now they can chuck things at you. They can chuck, you know, 9 trillion greed new deals and stuff. But when they do that transition, if they start chucking stuff at you, it'll be paper money. So that's what happened in France with us, you know, is that when they, you know, wiped out everybody's savings, then they say, well, okay, here's a whole lot of new funding and new, you know, freebies, and they basically start throwing money at the people, but it's paper money. So it basically, you know, it turns to shit, and then they're in a worse situation. They have to do it all over again. And you have 2 or 3 of those, and, you know, then heads roll, as happened in France. But the winner is the environment. As soon as all of this happens, you know, I don't think many people actually do their doctor's thesis or doctoral thesis in history or anything on, like, the, you know, the revival of the natural environment in Paris during the French Revolution. I don't think anybody does that, but I bet you, if you did, you would find that, you know, there was forest restoration, the fish, more fish in the rivers and stuff. Basically, ecological recovery, you know, while it looks like history is all going to shit, you mustn't forget that that translates to ecological recovery. So it's something to celebrate. We have it upside down.
Hugh, do we want to change the subject a bit, or you got some more to say on that?
No, sure. Yeah, sure.
Do you want to, before the meeting, Hugh and I were having two discussions. One was in relation to the moderator of the Extinction Rebellion Reddit subreddit, and the other was a more psychological, spiritual discussion. Hugh, do you want to just say a few words about the Extinction Rebellion sub to start it off a little bit?
Yeah, it's I don't really know what. Sort of put a few things out. I asked Blondie if she would intervene, but I didn't hear back from her on that. But and then Sophie asked them to fill out that complaint site for Reddit to say that somebody's squatting on your intellectual property or there's copyright infringement. And then Gary asked Veneratio 5 for a conference. And he did respond, but kind of aggressively. But yeah, I'm not really sure what you do about a guy, who's squatting on the thing. If XArts itself won't move to protect the intellectual property, it's kind of they've licensed him to carry on squatting on it. But what I hope is that enough people have seen our little struggle. And, when we're out of the game, pretty much the sub is just a kind of a weak version of collapse, right? So it's like already somebody was complaining and said, like, why is this just turned into like a, weak eco-anxiety little doom scrolling sub? So people might notice that and then they might kick up a fuss. But, if some guys got that sub, it's his sub. The fact that everybody mistakes it for Extinction Rebellion is only Extinction Rebellion's business. So, there's only so much we can actually do. But I really would like to get hold of that sub. Boot him off.
Perhaps.
I can't think of a way to do it.
And I'm just wondering later on, depending on what action Faulty takes in recovering direct control of the intellectual property and everything there, that would be the time to wait and see, because he's just going to be in a position to just act directly, I guess.
There's 20,000 people. There's 20,000 people. So it's not something to throw away in case, it seems like it's enormously US based though. So I don't know if XR UK would be interested so much in, I wrote to that girl called Jenny Scott who works in XR who answered my email, and I haven't heard from her, but it's the weekend. So we'll see what she does with that form that Hugh sent. But it is in the long term, you're right, Gary, we should wait maybe, but it's going to be very useful. 20,000 people in a sub, like it's quite important.
I'm just wondering where people like Blondie are perhaps not so busy after the summer action is over. She might be more inclined to follow up things like that. It's probably just not a good time to be taking on side issues from their point of view.
I hope so. I think she might have taken a week's vacation. The last thing she said was, sorry, but things are so busy, I can't get to this yet. But she said she would, but then I didn't hear anymore. But But anyway, I guess we just have to weather it. Just things are moving a bit slow. But I think one of the things that has happened is that Exile's a bit demoralized after this last fiasco, and I think they're heading towards just becoming a bit like Greenpeace or the Green Party or something. Is just just a protest group that does nothing, just does a banner drop and placards and has a few demonstrations that are peaceful. So in other words, they're just fizzling out.
Can we? Can I just bring this to a more personal level? Just regarding our involvement with an action like posting things onto the Extinction Rebellion, cross-posting, and basically, trying to brigade them a little bit, or even a lot. Sophie, can I ask you? You received a rather blunt reply from the moderator of that sub, as I understand it. I mean, from your personal point of view, how do you cope with that emotionally when you find that you've got involved in an unpleasant situation like that, in which you've got some emotional investment, and just would you mind just saying something about that? What's your sort of response and how you handle it?
Oh, you're mute, Sophie.
Sorry, I can you clarify a little bit what you want me to answer on, because I posted something on XRMed. I'm trying to find it now as we speak. A while ago, a few days ago, and it was just to say that I was horrified that people were being, and that they, and I thought that it was that it was not the real XR, that they were. I can't remember the exact text of my, because it was removed anyway. Is that what you're referring to?
No, I think you wrote somewhere, but I'm not sure where, that you received a rather nasty reply from that moderator, that it was full of anger and
oh
that,
yeah,
that was what I was.
it's funny because he removes things, and he does funny things, like, so even some things I don't know. It's just so. I'm trying to find what he sent me, but it was just. I can't even.
Yeah, I mean, we don't actually need to find that, but what I was more interested in getting to is for how that affected you personally.
Oh no!
Did it have?
I was laughing. No, I thought. I mean, I was laughing really, to be honest. That was just no, because that shows the type of. I mean, that guy is just. He has no interest really in XR. I think he's just running his little. It looks like even he's like a saboteur. No, I just didn't have any. No. I thought I was actually, to the club of the band there is increasing, because your post, Gary, was removed. Next thing you'll be banned, and and he's just. I don't. No, I didn't feel
Gary's
anything.
banned. Gary was banned.
Yeah, very short. Very short. Yeah. No, I was just.
I had to block him, but that was a long time ago. Because not this time, but I had to block him also several months ago, because he started to interact with me on comments, and he was starting to be very. He was saying he thought I was a young boy, and he was saying that I was a fan of Lord Hugh, and I was a little, I don't know. And I had to block him at that stage, but I don't think I blocked him there. I might have blocked him again just in case, but yeah. No, I haven't had any. It didn't stop me from sleeping and eating, and I forgot about it as soon as I closed Reddit. So
yeah, I'm afraid I didn't manage to accomplish your feat of equanimity there, but I got had just generally had a rather bad reaction to the experience. Just you know, upset about it. And it's not normally a thing that I would enter into. I wouldn't normally do a thing like that anyway, because I'm aware that I don't cope with it very well. And you know, so it was just something that Hugh and I were discussing. And I was just curious about what your response was there. Can I go on a little bit? What I then wanted to do is just bring this over to a matter of Hugh has spoken at times. You know, obviously we know about the process of a spiritual breakthrough, or you know, having a breakdown leading to a breakthrough. And the question I asked was, in a situation where a person is experiencing extreme emotional response to something, and seems to just be stuck with that response, that it doesn't sort of come to some cataclysmic crisis, and yet it doesn't really go away. You're stuck in a very unfortunate, painful condition. And so my question to Hugh was, in that situation, I thought that the procedure would be to try and make the whole thing worse somehow, to precipitate a thoroughgoing collapse. And Hugh said to me, no, that he felt that wasn't, this was the point at which you let go. And I realized after we'd spoken that I hadn't really understood what he meant by that. So at this point, Hugh, can you come in and just go over that again, what you mean for a person in that situation, what it means for them to let go, what you're actually talking about there?
So the breakthrough is to surrender and let go. You see, your alien cortex is holding on to life and control, and the signature of its actually giving up is losing control and just letting go. So, you know, if you come to a sort of a breakdown that's entirely all negative and your alien cortex hasn't been defeated, what it'll do often is like haul out a gun and shoot you. So it'll do anything it can to maintain control. And the liberation is to realize that we don't have control. I was quite impressed with Faulty's the video I just posted now of him and Claire on the magnitude of all things, which I saw the trailer and Faulty didn't like it. He said, they said not a lot of people actually saw it, and he said that's probably a good thing. And then he went into interesting dialogue, which I absolutely agreed with. But he was saying the same thing as I'm saying, and that's that all our pain and misery comes from this idea that we actually have impact, we have control. And it's a conceit, it's a vainglorious conceit. It's a kind of a megalomania to think that you know, we matter. And part of that idea that we really matter is our yen for immortality. So it's like, you know, you only want to be immortal because you think you matter it down. If you don't, if you think of yourself just as a new to a fly or something, it's like, you know, nobody sheds a tear when a fly gets swatted. But it's kind of strange that we certainly shed a tear when a human gets swatted, even though there are 8 billion, there's no shortage. And we're just one of those 8 billion, and we should hold our lives cheap. But instead, our lives are the most important thing. And that's the source of misery in the world. It's more than greed or love of money is the root of all evil. It's that nexus of self. It's that idea that basically you're the most important person on the dance floor, and you just wreck the fucking dance. And now we have so many people that think they God. That's what Enlightenment humanism has led to, is this idea that if it's just us and our experience and our feelings and our identity, then that's the most important thing in the world. In other words, that's God. That's the be all and end all. That is the measure of all things. And so it's like, where do you get that idea that it's that it matters a damn? I mean, we're here for such a short time. We only, you can only speak at about a baud rate of about 60K bits per second. The visual information you can take in is about 100 meg. It's about an internet connection's worth. And if you just stand on a mountaintop or just look at a city, or when you take off on a plane and just look down at all the little houses, just think of all the people there living their lives as if their tiny little lives is the greatest story ever told. That it's the passion of Christ goes into every one of their little arguments and family tiffs and divorces, and it's the passion of the Christ in every one of them. And it doesn't matter to a pile of beans. And if everybody took that attitude and said, like, what the fuck, man? I'm here for such barely get a look in. You can have your little think, make a comment on the world, and then die. More than a fly.
Can I just think?
And if everybody
I guess
had
you're talking
to,
about
we'd be a lot better off. But they don't. They actually get involved in this,
So,
and they won't let go. So it means just humbling yourself to nothing, to just say, like, what does it matter? What does it matter if basically what's going to happen? The story's not a big mystery. At some stage, every one of us, we die. And then what happens? Nobody gives a fuck after that, man. Look at the other people that died around you. My mom died 2 months ago. I think most of the family's even forgotten who she is two months later. And I don't expect any different treatment. So it's like, we don't matter. So this secular humanism and stuff is causing us immense misery.
It's funny.
But
That's
it's just a question of letting go. It's just saying, go out on a starry night and look up at the sky and say, you don't matter. You don't matter. Look at the stars. Look how many there are. And look at, we're one minor sun in a minor part of a galaxy. Maybe we are the only life on Earth, but even so, there's a hell of a lot of space, a hell of a lot of stuff, and you don't really matter. And that's the liberation.
So it's basically that sketch for Monty Python that comes to mind. But you know the one I'm talking about. I can't think what it's called now.
Yeah, they were quite profound. I really like that sketch. There was the world is spinning round, and
Yeah.
the world is spinning round at 1,000 miles an hour in an orbit around the sun, which gives us power.
The other question
really
is then, what does the individual do with his own pain? Like you've got, all right, so you might have this appreciation of the immensity of existence and your tiny, insignificant position in relation to that. But as that tiny speck, you still have your own private agony, physically or psychologically, emotionally, and all the rest of it. That's still all yours. Even though everybody else will feel that it's common to everybody else in the sense that they'll feel that sensation too. You're left with that
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the individual tends to obsess about their pain, and that's where the pain comes from. So they're still saying, if the Buddha was saying that his whole shtick was how to avoid misery of life and pain and transcend it. Well, ironically, the first way to alleviate pain is not to give it so much importance, and then it doesn't appear. So in other words, I'm not describing this very well. You're having pain because you care about having pain. The moment you don't give a shit about your own pain, you don't have any more. So you're giving that, it's a self-torture. Your alien cortex is really torturing you. And you've got to ask yourself, where's the source of that pain? It comes from the belief in that the pain is important.
Isn't it though?
Do you remember that
comes
time when
in
you
who
said you
is
were?
suffering? Who is suffering? Not
You remember
what.
that time when you said you were injured, right? And you had a.
Sorry.
You remember that time?
Yeah, I remember.
Just finish the thought. So you remember that time when you got injured, and you had a bad injury enough to like traumatize everybody else around you, but you were aloof from it, and there wasn't any pain.
Yeah.
Well, that condition was because you didn't care about the pain. Caring about the pain gives you the pain.
Yes, but it wasn't a. It's not a. It was. I guess in a situation like that, it wasn't. I didn't choose to be in that, to adopt that perspective on the pain. It was just the way it was. That was just what was how it was at the time. It wasn't as if I thought to myself, it's frightful. I've got to not identify with this. This was something that was simply a situation that had arisen by itself. And I guess the other thing is, fine, for X amount of time after this trauma had occurred, I might have not felt it. But supposing nobody came to the rescue and you were left lying there, you would eventually start to feel that pain, I guess. Your body would not be in shock anymore, and this kind of thing, which is probably protecting you to some extent. I guess what I'm trying to just get back to for a minute is what we were talking about when I mentioned the number of times you've referred to that scene from the Braveheart film, and the question of immense physical suffering in a situation like that. Actually, I'll stop there. Do you want to say something now before I go on to an additional point?
Yeah. So all these things stem from this belief that, and it's this kind of humanist belief, that whether we suffer or not is important. So in other words, we think we should try not to suffer. See, I think the Buddha was kind of wrong on this respect, because he based all his philosophy on how not to feel pain, how to get liberated from suffering. And that is not the highest state. The highest state is to say that we shouldn't get so wrapped up in suffering and pleasure and all of these things. It's basically, it's like you say, like, well, we must maximize the good. We must be utilitarian. We must make sure people don't suffer. Why? See, we really, really think it matters. But ask yourself why. So, well, no, we can't have like 8 billion people suffering. Well, why the fuck not? See, whether we want, we are bound inextricably in this kind of level of bondage by thinking we must avoid pain and pursue pleasure. And then that's our bondage. So we're creating that bondage out of this belief that we must try and make things other than they are. And so letting go is to say, however things are, accept them. So you see, there's a subtle difference between the liberal way and our culture, which says, it doesn't work. I mean, as soon as you've achieved less suffering, look what happens. Everybody turns into a milk toast, and they become so sensitive that they just find suffering in a new way. So if I alleviated the entire world's suffering, all that would do would elevate it. It's a bit like the pursuit of immortality. Is for every year that you gain on with fending off mortality, if it became the norm that everybody in America suddenly lived for 150 years, well, that's not making the situation better. That's making it worse, because when they die, it's 150 years of tragedy. And then if they die at 10 years old, then it's much worse than if the life expectancy was 30. If the life expectancy is 30 and you die at 10 years old, well, you've only missed out on 2/3 of your life. So the more you pursue things like immortality, if you live for 1,000 years, then if you die at 500, that's a tragedy. So you can't win down that path. Alleviating pain and increasing pleasure doesn't work.
No,
Eventually you just get to the difference. So you get onto
no,
a hedonic treadmill, and
yeah,
everything regulates. I mean, if you get rich enough and you get spoilt enough and you become like one of these rich dudes, that basically the color of the wallpaper is traumatizing for you. And if you're an African kid, it's that equivalent amount of trauma would be seeing your whole village wiped out. So you can't win down this route that we insist on. So the humanist project is dead.
I think
I guess,
the humanist project was based a lot on bourgeois values that were effort and work, as opposed to old aristocratic values that were courage and honor. And those two started to collide when we started to get into our industrial times. And I think I often think about these old words of courage and honor. Seriously, they might have been brought to me by my education, as opposed to work and effort and economy and productivity, and that orients immediately towards suffering. If you if you go the other way, you automatically overcome this by courage.
what's courage?
It sounds awfully like Jordan Peterson, but it is correct. See, in medieval times, they didn't think in terms of, well, we must make sure no one suffers. They thought, well, life is short and eternity is forever. So think about eternity. And a bit of suffering now, if it guarantees you some better place in heaven, so much the better. And I can't help feeling they're better off for it, because look how much trouble we cause ourselves by trying to avoid trouble. So we try to avoid pain. Look at this pandemic. By trying to avoid the consequences of this pandemic, we've made it much, much worse. The same with finances. Now we can't have a dip in the markets anymore because, well, somebody's going to get some pain. So we just, basically stimulus after stimulus after stimulus to keep the stock market from correcting. And you're just shoring up much more pain in the end. So the pursuit or the flight from pain is what causes it. The flight from mortality, us to die early. We're about to start geoengineering. That's a flight from our own mortality. It'll just make it worse. It'll underline it, make it more certain.
But to
But we'd
answer
be much
Gary's
better off if we just said we don't
if
care
I
about
may,
pleasure and pain.
if I may answer Gary's question, who was asking me what is courage. I think, from my experience, it's something you learn when you're faced with hard physical experiences in nature. Like, you look at animals, you understand what is courage. Like, you climb a mountain, you're in cold water, you face a storm, you fall down a mountain. It takes courage to go through. It's very basic. My idea of courage. It's a way of handling life. You just it's instinctual. Maybe as a woman, I've been through different experiences than you men around here, but that's what I see it as a very basic thing, courage. If you understand what I mean, Gary. It's not something, oh, I'm great, courageous, courage. It's just something you learn when you're faced with basic physical difficulties, pain, cold, I don't know, all these things that a body has to go through when you grow up. And if you don't have that, you You go for safety instead of freedom, you know, and you just don't learn that. That's how I see courage. It's not just it's a learning process.
Yeah, I meant courage. You see, in the way you put it, is similar to the situation I was in, where you actually weren't being courageous at all. You were just involved with whatever was going on. Was you know, it's not as if you were adopting some kind of an attitude to this. It was your condition was bound up in what was happening.
But most time courage doesn't happen like that. Courage is just in you. You just don't even think, oh, I'm going to be courageous.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yes.
It's sort of, you know.
That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, because courage is kind of marketed to us as this thing that you must invoke in the face of whatever arises. You know, you must sort of you pull this thing out of your little toolkit as required to cope with these various situations. That nobody's actually explained what the fuck it is, or what the hell you do when you can't when you're one of those terribly inadequate poor things who can't find any courage. You must be a failure. I still want to come back to, if I can, I don't know if it's labouring the point, I want to come back to the fellow in Braveheart, or to the Christ nailed to his cross, or, you know,
So
what's happening there? Why
so
aren't
this
they?
is what I think about courage.
You're in a situation where you would expect people to be a screaming heap, I guess. And you know, if you find yourself in a position like that, what? God, I'm sorry, I just don't even know what to ask. Do you want to talk a little bit? Is I'm bringing anything up for you to respond to?
Yeah. So the question I've got for you is, why do you want to have courage? What's the point?
No, I didn't say I wanted to. I was just asking the question what it was. I wasn't saying that at all. I think in some situations that I've been in, it's probably been just what Sophie said. That was just how I was at the time. It wasn't something I was attempting to do, or courage wasn't something I was attempting to invoke. It just happened to just. The other people might have looked at it and said, "Oh, isn't that person being courageous?" But in fact, that person was just doing what was gone.
I think it's more important to be wise than to be courageous. So it's more consciousness and wisdom is more elevated than courage. See, our society tells us that we must have courage, but the reason it's doing that is courage comes from cœur, from heart in French. So it's like brave heart, and our society says you must have brave heart, and they're saying that because they want soldier ants to protect the colony, and also because life is self-reinforcing. So it's kind of a Darwinian thing that, you know, if you have a group that doesn't actually value courage, then they're probably going to die out. But it's very important to elevate yourself above this tokenism of our culture. So, you know, Jordan Peterson might wax on about courage, and you can say, well, you get courage like this, and talk about courage like it's a must-have. And he's saying, no, you want to ditch that idea of must-haves. So, you know, why do you want courage any more than you want cowardice?
Yeah, we got off the track a little bit.
They're
the
both
point
just
I wanted
different sides of the same coin. The point is to elevate above the coin.
Yeah. I wanted to just. I don't know if there's any future in the line.
So the point, but one more thing. The point is to stop using that currency. It's not to say, you know, what you're saying is, oh, heads is better than tails, and people can go argue that and say, like, this is how I achieved courage, and it's like, this is how I threw heads. It's fine. So just say, I don't deal in that
No,
currency anymore.
no, it's not.
Sometimes
Yeah,
cowardice is good. Sometimes courage is good. Sometimes people will do one or the other. But there's nothing good about courage and bad about cowardice. So basically, it's like Derek Jensen tells a story about how the mother bear in his backyard had 2 cubs. And he found it remarkable that one was daring and courageous and was probably going to get killed. And then one was really like, cowering and timid. And that was probably one is going to live through in different circumstances. So in some circumstances, courage is required, and some cowardice. But our society tells us, spins us a story telling us, no, you must be courageous. Why? Because they're trying to throw you under a bus. They don't want you enlightened. They want you dumb and fighting for the
yeah, but it all depends on the definition of courage. I think, because I don't know, maybe we're not going the same direction, and what I mean by courage, I see it also as a transcendence, as a wise move, as a it's something that comes with initiation at a very young age. It's not something that is just that you take on. Okay, I'm going to be courageous. It's a whole process, and it's not just. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking really from a woman's point of view there, and maybe I don't have the. I think I can hear the vibes of a masculine definition of courage there, and brave heart, and I don't see it exactly the same way, and we have to maybe just adjust our differences and complement our definitions there. But yeah, it's very interesting.
So I'm talking about transcendence, right? I'm saying to get out of these dualities. So to me, I hear that you're promoting one side of a duality. And I say, no, they're just the dualities. Wisdom is rising above those dualities. Women find it harder to rise above the dualities. And maybe it's better that way. But if you're talking about Zen type transcendence, it means transcending out of dualities. And as you're talking up one duality, like Jordan Peterson does. Whereas what I'm saying is, no, ditch them. You see, you're making some virtue out of courage. It's like, well, I can show you where it's a liability. If you get into a storm in a boat and you have courage, it's not a good thing. You're much better off having cowardice and running for the nearest cove. There's no, you see, everybody's looking for an absolute in a duality. And there is no refuge in it. You've got to rise above the dualities.
how?
Well,
Interesting.
I mean, you don't have to.
No, but that's
but if you want
interesting.
wisdom, you do.
I'm going to listen. I want to think about that. Thank you.
Hugh, we got off onto cowardice, which wasn't my intention, but that was worthwhile addressing. And I guess what I wanted to focus down on was, I don't know if I'm laboring the point. I wanted to focus down on the person who's nailed to a cross and being crucified, or the person who's being disassembled in some medieval torture chamber or something like that. And I know in our conversation you said, well, those things were often exemplary, and they weren't necessarily the rule, and this kind of thing. But I guess it's kind of when you witness a thing like that, even in a fictional, even in the context of a movie or something like that, it's a terribly distressing thing to entertain in your mind, and to think of what it would be like for yourself if you're in that position. And I guess the question I suppose I could ask is, if you or I or somebody here found themselves in that position, what? Well, I don't know. What they can't do anything about it. Is it just perhaps like Sophie talking about some experience that women have had, or like I said when that accident occurred, that you're just in it and it's not a case of what you decide about it. It's just whatever's happening. I mean, if you're screaming and you've totally lost it, or if you're going to be all stoical, if you can manage it, and you know, obviously there's certain yogis and that with the complete control over their physical bodies who could just absolutely just you know, have all that pain there and not have any particular response to it. That was the point I was trying to get to, was when it came right down to that really nitty-gritty point of this inescapable pain. Because if we talk about emotional pain and lots of other things, there's always these escapes and side routes, and you can the discussion gets escapes from the point. But you know, when you're tied to a rack, or when you're being nailed to a cross, or whatever thing that they do these days in the dungeons of American, you know, alphabet soup organizations, whatever those equivalents are. So can you talk about that just for a bit?
So rather than point to answer the question directly, I'll try and point to how you transcend it. So first, let me just clarify what I mean by that. If I answer your question directly, I'm not doing you a good service, because what I'm doing is, I'm like a, say, jiu-jitsu, and people come to a jiu-jitsu instructor and they say, we want to kill a move. It's the alien cortex saying, I don't ever want to die. Now, if the jiu-jitsu instructor say, oh, I'll give you a killer move, basically, if you get somebody from the left side, you distract them here and get them there, you win every time. And then you haven't done the student much good, because you've sent them with something that gives them a lot of courage and basically gives them a lot of confidence, but will probably get them killed sooner. So you don't want to help people in their ignorance. And they're asking an ignorant question. They're saying, Master, how do I have invincible sword moves so I'm never defeated? And you say, arsehole, you're going to die. You're a fucking samurai. We die with a fucking sword through our head. That's the first thing you need to know. So get over the idea that there are these winning moves that you can win. You know, that's your alien cortex. That's the thing we're trying to defeat. And that's the thing that's playing chess and reading Sun Tzu and saying, I'm never going to die. I'm never going to be defeated. So that's the misery of the world encapsulated in that thought. So here's the point here. So that's what I'm saying, why I won't answer the question directly is like, what's the killer move so that it allows you to be on a rack and you can basically transcend the situation? Well, I'm telling you, you can't. Basically, you can play chess as well as you fucking like, but in this game, no matter how good a samurai you are, you're going to get sick, you're going to get old, you're going to be distracted, you're just going to flub it, and you're going to get a fucking sword through the head. So don't wait till that time to basically get your liberation. Learn in advance. Say, this is what happens to us. We're just fucking chimps and we die. So you can go into resistance and politics, and basically you can be the biggest rebel known to man, and you know, everybody wants to be the artful fox and get out of every situation. That happens in the movies. The movies are not doing you a good service, because when you eventually get the chop, which you're going to do, then you're going to go, oh, I'm miserable, oh, I failed it, basically, or you're going to descend to this point of ego, which is not transcendent. If you say, the way to see it is more like a play. So you say, like, I'm going to basically do my best pirate impression. I'm going to be the best samurai. I'm going to be the ninja. I'm going to be Bruce Lee, knowing that I'm just doing a play. And part of the play is when some guy does a blooming sucker punch in the end and gets me. And you go, oh, done. I was the greatest swordsman known to man, and somebody stabbed me in the back. And you have to play all the way. If you're going to play the game well, you have to play the game knowing that it ends badly. No one wins. That's the thing. So once you realize that no one wins, and somebody's going to, how fucking genius you are, that day is your liberation. And on that day, then you become a decent swordsman. But you cannot do it until while you think you can always win. They will always get you. A guy that knows that one day he's going to lose will always be a better swordsman than you. So the very key to the thing you're looking for is to lose that key, if that makes any sense. So it's giving up on this idea that you can be something. And then, okay, so that's the one thing. Now let me point the finger to the liberation. When you must understand, once you get to be a good swordsman, and you can actually be a samurai, and you know, the world's Bruce Lee. Well, knowing full well that one day you get it in the chops, is that once you get to that, then you get into this new game, which is more like a game. It's more fun, it's more theatrical, and then you start to see the world's madness. And so then when you get to these situations where, say, Braveheart is on the stake or Christ is on the cross, then you know that it's a syndrome. And part of the syndrome is that our society, our alien cortex, it needs to scapegoat something. So the alien cortex in the people, you know, basically all the Pharisees or the Jewish elders or Pontius Pilate and all these characters, they all represent our alien cortex doing a substitution of itself for immortality. So basically we get Christ, we make this Christ figure, and we scapegoat him, we nail him up to a cross. It's a substitution, and what our alien cortex is trying to do is say, there, but for the grace of God go I. So it's say like, well, Christ died for me, now I don't have to die. Wrong, arsehole. You've got to die. Doesn't matter how fucking Christian you are. Christ died 2,000 years ago if he even existed, but you'd still have to die, arsehole. You don't get out of it that way. So it's this insanity on the one part of the one party that needs to scapegoat, and that's the general population. There's another insanity in Christ. Christ then is saying that he is the Son of God, and basically he has this Messiah complex. He wants to die. He wants to be eaten. It's a very fucked up psychology. You can see it fairly recently. There was a very macabre thing in Germany where this guy found this other guy on the internet, and it was a marriage made in heaven. It was a guy that wanted to, you know, cannibalize somebody, and it was a guy that wanted to be eaten. And together they, you know, cut the guy's, you know, the victim's dick off and ate it together, fried it up and ate it, and the other guy killed himself in the bath, and then the, you know, the cannibal guy ate him. And the German court didn't know what to do because it's consenting adults. They eventually put the guy in a mental institution, I think. But that is our whole society. If the German government can put that guy in a mental society, it can put all of us in the mental society, because that's what our society does. It basically makes these Elon Musks, puts them up on a pedestal, and then it wants them taken down. It wants them to be. So what it's saying is, this is me. I elevate you. This is part of a process. It's a ritual. It says, I elevate you. Now you are the Godhead. Now we kill the Godhead. That releases me, my Godhead. And so it's sick as all fuck. But nobody ever calls it out like I'm calling it out. They never call out the Messiah, and they never call out all these fuckwits that want to nail him to the cross. So we go through this over and over again. We you know, Andrew is one, you know, he's a royal and he's up there, and then, oh, don't we love it when he's brought down, and then we squish him and cut him up, eat him. It's this endless ritualization of substitution of our own death. But you see, it's a fucked up play. It's not, they said this is the greatest story ever told. No, it's the most miserable, lame, predictable, fucked up story that just repeats and repeats and repeats, and we've got to stop it. See, the thing about Christ is you have to say, no, we have to bury that fucking story. We just do it over and over and over again. It's like, it's boring as fuck, guys. Let's stop. And that's what we need to do, is transcend that. So the fucker on the cross needs to get down. What Jesus should have said was, oh, sorry about the Son of God shit. It was just my mom. I was covering for her. So anyway, I'm not the Son of God. I'm just a dumb schmuck like you. Don't put me up on the cross. And that would liberate everybody. But Jesus didn't do it. He went to the cross saying, I am the Son of God. Fuck you, arsehole. You're not the Son of God. There's everybody as much as a Son of God as Christ. If anything, we all God. So then Christ is a blasphemer, because he's saying, like, I am the Son of God. It's like, no, you fuckwit. We all God or nothing. Come on. Don't be stupid. So basically, we need to transcend this fucking syndrome of scapegoating and on the one hand and Messiah complex on the other. So I hope that helps you when you talk about Braveheart on the rack. Is all these people, you see the rich people, the oligarchs, they're trying to sacrifice us in the meat grinder. This, you know, how many slaves does a pharaoh have to basically toast to make him feel secure? Well, I'll tell you a fucking lie. We did it in South Africa. I'll tell you a secret to being a slave owner. You only feel good when they're dying like flies. Because what it means is, if they're dying like flies, you're not. And that's what makes you feel bad. But it's a terrible way to go. It makes this into a horrible prison planet. But you see, once you realize that's what the game is, then you're on a different level. And then the guys, then you understand, oh, these guys want to turn me into Braveheart or Christ or something like that. Then you say, okay, I get it. Mental home, here we go. These guys are fucking insane and we're in the prison yard. And then you start playing chess with them. But you know that you can't win. At some stage, you know, they're going to steamroll you. But that's the game. You have to say, well, now this is good theater. Now I suddenly understand the plot. Well, that's suddenly a much different thing. Then you can graduate on from Shakespeare to, say, Thomas Middleton. Thomas Middleton wrote a play called Game of Chess or Game of Chess. And this is what he was talking about. He was talking about this corrupt forces of the world, the bankers, the financiers, all these stupid assholes that make our life such a misery, from your first line boss to the prison warden to the president, all these fuckwits that make our lives miserable. He was saying that this is all this game of chess. And he analyzed it very well and basically said everybody that plays chess loses. So the game is to, like, liberate ourselves from playing chess.
So
Braveheart was an idiot because he didn't stop them playing chess. He basically did. Well, Hollywood, through, you know, Braveheart and the Australian guy, I can't remember what is it, Mel Gibson. Through Mel Gibson, Hollywood ritualized our bloody crucifixion stuff. So what he was doing there was Christ, and we love it. We love it because we are him while he's lying on the rack. The reason why we're posting that, because you can imagine it so well. So you can imagine yourself rack, and you absolute empathy, all the mirror neurons are firing for him, in sympathy with him on the rack. But here's the thing. Your sympathy goes all the way until a certain point where it snaps, and then he dies, and you get to walk out of the cinema. And that's where everybody's buzzed. That's where Hollywood makes a lot of money out of Braveheart. Because everybody goes and says, I felt I died, but I'm alive. And so that is really a substitute for the realizational experience, where your alien cortex dies and you live. So what the catharsis that everybody goes through, the Hollywood catharsis that everybody goes through watching the movie Braveheart, is really the alien cortex substituting real liberation, the liberation that I'm talking about, the breakdown, the psychosis, the real breakdown, where you die, not Mel Gibson on a screen. If you can go through that, then from there on out, everything that happens in the world is just a screenplay. And suddenly you can start being a good actor. Suddenly it gets more exciting, it gets better, there's less pain. Everything you want comes from dying early. Everybody's trying to avoid death and then getting a shit deal. But if you can die early, then everything's enjoyable. You're in bonus time, you're in a movie, you don't care about the outcome anymore. Then it suddenly gets interesting. It's not interesting. Most people's lives are fucking boring. It's, I don't want to die, 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 oh fuck, I'm dead. That's most people's lives. It's like, look at every fucking living thing in the world. It all fucking dies. It doesn't matter. This is like what I was most conscious of in my youth, playing in the veldt in South Africa, was not Darwinism. You don't see competition. They're not animals leaping on each other. They're, you know, people that go every year to the game reserve and spend a month in the game reserve. They could do that for their entire life and only see a lion kill once, if they were lucky. But you know, if you watch all the fucking Darwin videos on the National Geographic, all it is this, you know, this Dickie Dawkins thing where there's endless, ceaseless struggle with the lions and everything, a war of all against all. And it's like, you can tell that Dickie Dawkins, even though he grew up in Kenya, he hasn't spent a minute in Africa. Because that's not the impression you get. Animals are not struggling against it. They're all vigorous, having a good fucking thing, doing their snaky life and their fucking lion life and all their little fucking lives that they've evolved to do. And then they get overcome. They get overcome by disease. They get overcome by a predator. They just fucking trip on a rock and then they die. And then what happens is there's this big vacuuming job where everything comes and vacuums them all up and it all disappears. All the little beetles and ants take them all, and it's basically, it's nature recycles it, absolutely. And that's what it is. It's a big recycling operation. Nature just says, here's your life, done, okay, recycle. And that's all it does. So
that's really funny.
Here we come along. You're not going to recycle me.
You're exactly
just run the fucking game that nature's trying to play. We all need to live and get cycles.
You posted that video of Roger Allen and Claire talking about before their rebellion. And it was a long talk, and she first talks, and then he talks. It's short. The video is about 20 minutes, I think. And on the second part, Roger talks exactly like you about giving up on the idea of death, and how him as an organic farmer understands exactly what it is, what you're talking about, which is just the endless recycling of everything, the futility of getting attached to the idea of death. Did anybody in the group listen to Roger there on that video that was posted on the sub? Because he's laughing his way through it, and it's quite good, and it's exactly resonates with what you're talking about now. Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, you see. But you see, he's an organic farmer, so you know you're closer to the earth, and so I have the same thing, because basically Africa is a little rougher, and you spend more time out of doors. We don't have television and stuff, so you know, we the reason why Roger and I are saying the same thing now is because we are closer to nature, and so. The average, you see, we've paid a heavy price from being away from nature. And the reason why we were talking earlier about how in medieval times the state didn't have this conception of self and individuality and identity and my feelings and ego and all of the stuff that causes the misery of the world. We didn't have it because we couldn't afford it. And you can't see it. It's not prevalent out in the wild. So it's just it's an urban problem, and it goes to exactly what I was saying is, what have we achieved? This whole fucking urban nightmare. We all did it to make our lives better, to make it easier, and what's happened? Now we're going fucking extinct. I mean, okay, it had its merits, and you know, maybe if you get your rocks off going to the moon or something, but on the whole, there's all fucking pyramids and misery, and you know, they take this tiny isolated little sliver. This little, you know, look what we did. We went to the moon. And it's like, yeah, but look at all the bastards that built the rocket. They all went home and beat their wives because they basically couldn't afford the rent. So yeah, it's very, very a partial view of wonders of civilization. What civilization has done is, in the pursuit of an easy life and an immortality, has basically done the opposite. It's made a miserable life. And basically now we're all going to go extinct. So we got a little boost. People got to live longer, but they had less quality of life in that time, less wisdom, and then extinction. Now extinction for all of us. So because of the selfishness of a few generations, we've cost ourselves millions. Millions of people could have enjoyed this planet. They're not gonna. We're probably going to die back to life forms that mean it'll be another 60 million years before you get anything close to sentience we have. So just think of all the billions and billions of people that could have had a fucking great time screaming on the African plain, being like gorillas in the mist, having, you know, wonderful time, enjoying a salad bowl and having, you know, fighting each other and screwing each other and having a blast. Looking at the scenery, jumping in the water, teasing the tigers. We could have done that for a fucking million more years. No, we can't do it because everybody wants it to be smooth and nice. They don't want any pain. They want maximized pleasure. And what's the result? Extinction. Great, genius, great.
Oh. Well, this. Are we gonna? Is that enough for the meeting? Do you think?
I did you in, Gary. But anyway, Gary, just let go. You just let go of the struggle. Is everybody struggling? You see, the salvation of the world would be if we just said, "Oh, fuck it." But we got to keep up hope. No, lose hope. Lose hope.
Yeah.
I just got to say one more thing, and then maybe we can end it unless anybody's got a question. But I've said this before, but it's worth iterating again. Is like, I'm not saying anything new. This was all told in ancient Greece. So again, this is the story of Pandora's box. Sophie mentioned the thing about opening Pandora's box, but this is what Pandora's box was. Why don't we teach this shit to kids in school? Instead of teaching woke shit, we should be teaching them ancient Greek mythology. And then we could explain to them, this is what Pandora's box is about. It's basically Pandora opened the box and let out all the evils of the world. And then here's the kicker that nobody hears. It says, the last thing at the bottom of the box was what, class?
Hope.
Hope. Yeah, it was hope. Okay, children, do you get it? Hope is in the box full of the world's evils. It is the thing at the bottom of the box of all the world's evils. So it is evil. Hope is evil. Got it? Ancient Greeks told us, and we just like,
Yeah, but it's been twisted with a Christian kind of, I don't know, classic kind of thing.
No, hope is evil.
I know that's the Greek.
No,
I understand
hope
the
is
Greek
evil.
interpretation, but later on, the tale was twisted to people and saying, after all the evils, you have hope. But you're right.
No,
I agree.
no, don't twist it. It's the same Greek hope. No, didn't twist it. Didn't twist it. Same thing. The hope that they're pushing now with the Green New Deal and, we've got to keep up hope, and Naomi Klein and Michael E. Mann and, don't give up hope. That's the hope the Greeks were talking about. Nobody twisted it.
The Greeks were talking about evil. About an evil, and that hope is an evil. But a lot of people who are looking at that story,
that's what they were trying to tell us.
That's
what they were trying to tell us. No, that's what I'm saying. They're not changing it. Well, the Greeks are talking about the hope that we're talking. When we say hope now, they're talking about that.
How does this?
No, nobody changed it. The Greeks were talking about this is shit that they tell.
How does that sit next to the to this notion of doing the right thing regardless? That's not hopeful. That's not hope in the sense that, well, you're doing that without any regard for whether it achieves your desired outcome or not. But the reason I'm mentioning it is that because the notion of doing the right thing, especially now in the end times and all the rest of it, simply doing it because it's the right thing to do, isn't that a kind of a last thing in the same way that hope is held onto as a last thing? In other words,
yes, it's just scaffolding, right? It's just guardrails for people pre-realization. After realization, there is no right thing. The right thing is bullshit. Okay, So duty and the right thing and stuff is actually bullshit, but that's the
Yeah.
advanced course.
Yeah, okay.
You have to maintain, you see, before people are realized, you have to maintain the fiction
Yeah.
that there
No,
is such
I
a thing.
understand what you're saying.
Otherwise, they won't get to realization. They'll become drug addicts or
Yeah.
drunkards or something, you see.
Yeah.
So you have to tell people, you know, it's kind of like junior school rules, but ultimately when they graduate, they're like, you know, there's no right thing. Yep, welcome to liberation.
Yeah, okay. No,
I mean, what the fuck would right thing be? I mean, just think about it. It's like, by what measure? You have to set up a measure, and then you have to say, you know, at some point in time, and then maybe later in time with more information in a bigger context. So ethics and morality. Ryan has a lot of trouble with this one. But you have to maintain the fiction that there is such thing as right and wrong. But it doesn't bear scrutiny. That's why all these rabbis and Pharisees and stuff, they spend till eternity debating, you know, hair splitting about the law and, you know, what's right and stuff. And eventually you get to the fact where you keep dairy products and meat products separate in your kitchen, and you obey the Sabbath, and it starts to look like some kind of pathology. It starts to look like, you know, so that's
yeah.
it look like some kind of what do you call it, repetitive behavior, you know, what you know, those kind of
Obsessive?
compulsive behaviors. Yes, eventually
Yeah,
it starts to look like a compulsive behavior, and it's nutty.
Okay, yeah, I understand your point there. Yeah, it's rather like the yeah, beyond good and evil. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, the I guess you could say
There's life and death, but not so much.
yeah, the enlightened man, I guess, could do anything, and other people would say, "Oh, cool, goodness, he's done something bad," but he's not. That's not where he's coming from. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that.
But
Yeah,
you see,
okay.
you have to be a little bit careful. You have to be a little bit careful because you have to take into account what somebody's understanding is. And so if the understanding is limited, then you have to say, oh, well, the rules apply. For you, the rules apply.
I think it's the
but
perennial
you know,
problem of
once you graduate, the rules don't apply.
It's the perennial problem of the spiritual teacher to constantly have to be adjusting the way he delivers a message to the capacity of the audience, you know, and you know what is appropriate to say to one group of people or to one person is not necessarily for somebody else. So yeah,
you see the problem is you encourage somebody in a lie. So you get behavior where somebody they're not at all enlightened, but then they hear something like, oh, the enlightened man can do anything and won't incur any karma or something like that. And then they don't, because they haven't reached enlightenment, they still have an ego. Then somebody goes and, you know, insults them, it hurts their ego, and then they go and put a knife in the guy. Well, that's very kind of gross behavior. But then it's like, oh, but the absolute can do anything. You can't judge me for putting a knife. And say, yeah, I can, because you did it from a point of view of ego. You didn't do it from the point of view of an enlightened person. So you're using transference of authority. You did that action from the authority of an ego and a limited ignorance. So you can't claim afterwards the defense of another authority, the authority of a.
I suppose it's a little bit analogous to the non-existence of courage when you're in a situation, and you know that the enlightened person is simply acting as the entire situation demands, and he's not. It's not. How can I put it? Sorry, I lost the way I was going to put it.
If you're dumb enough to believe in courage, then you should be encouraged to be courageous. So,
yes, but I mean,
if you're dumb enough to believe in courage, you should be encouraged to be courageous.
Yeah.
But
if you're dumb enough, but yeah, it applies too.
Liberated is.
But it would apply too as an interesting perspective on a person trying to awaken spiritually. Is if you're dumb enough to believe in how can I put it?
No, if you're dumb enough to believe in enlightenment, then basically the guru must take you there. But
yeah, but what I'm saying is
exactly the same.
See, once you've seen the fallacy of this courage you're trying to attain, you act from a place that doesn't need that anymore. And I think the same with what we're just saying about the enlightened person is they're coming from a pure place where they just don't need these perspectives. It's irrelevant because it just occurs for them. It just naturally comes out of the way they are.
That's the strange paradox of enlightenment is. Yeah, the strange paradox of enlightenment is that there is no such thing.
Yeah.
But if somebody comes to you seeking enlightenment, it doesn't help you to say, there's no such thing. The guy will just go find somebody else who will lead him up the garden path, perhaps. So you can't say that. You have to say, yes, there's enlightenment. I will lead you there. The amazing thing is that when you lead the person to enlightenment, and then there is enlightenment and there isn't at the same time. It's very funny. You'll laugh your head off when you see, it's a psychosomatic illness. So I described it once to you before about how my this was a family story, that part of our family history had this story that my grandfather had this psychosomatic illness where he thought he had swallowed an eel and there was an eel growing inside him. And he went to doctor after doctor and they said, no, there's no such thing. Nobody swallows an eel and has an eel growing inside them. You're fine. And he couldn't get relief until he eventually got this more enlightened doctor who said, yes, I've heard of this before. It's very rare. But yeah, I think you've got an eel. And you're lucky because I happen to know how to operate on this. So he sedated him on the kitchen table or whatever, sent some kid down to the fishmongers to go and get an eel, and then basically put it in a dish. And when the guy came to, he said, here it is. I've got your eel. You were absolutely right. And my grandfather was cured. He went around telling everybody, see, you're the arseholes now. I was right. I wasn't. And enlightenment's like that. Is nobody has a fucking eel inside them. Nobody's not enlightened. But you have to go through the pretense and say, now you're enlightened, and then they get it. You see, like taking that analogy one step further, then at some stage you would say to my grandfather, it's like, or the doctor would say, I just went down to the fishmongers and got an eel, shoved it in the pan and just, put a whole lot of ink over your stomach to look like blood. You really didn't have an eel. And then he would be like, he's cured, so he's relieved from the problem, and then he could have a big laugh about it. And then he's really, really cured.
I guess that's...
But unfortunately, most people die thinking they have an eel in their stomach.
Yeah, it seems to be the major thing, that we're trying to, in a way, do something that we already are that anyway. It's a kind of a little circle we're caught in.
Yeah. To just round it out with a complete blasphemy and defile the sacred and just contravene Desiderata Extinctionati number 8, just to spell it out. The eel inside you is death, so nobody really dies. You appear to die, just like you appeared to be alive.
Yeah.
But we better leave it on that, because that's the real advanced course. But ultimately, that's what the allegory that I'm telling you of the eel inside you is. All of this is about denial of death. And the thing is that, sure, you die, but only in the sense that you were alive. And it's like, were you ever alive? You spent an eternity where it was completely black, no awareness, no sentience, didn't bother you in the slightest. You have this brief life that's like completely batshit crazy, and then you absolutely terrified that you'll have an eternity of darkness again. And it's like, why? You did okay before. Why do you care about it in the future?
Yeah.
And so that's what the
yeah.
story of the eel is about.
All right.
Yeah,
No,
maybe that's what I should have. Yeah, maybe that's what you should tattoo on your pillow. Is like, I had an infinity of non-sentience and darkness before I was born. Didn't bother me in the slightest.
yeah.
Shouldn't worry about it in the future.
No, I remember one of Alan Watts' talks. He said something very similar to that. You know, he just have reached some point with the audience, and he's just said, you know, hey, he said, well, you want to know what it's like when you die? It's just the same as what it was like before you were born. What are you worried about? You know, just sort of threw it at them. You did the same thing. You didn't
That's it,
complain before you
exactly.
were born. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the same. It's all a question of false identity. So you know, you don't care when other people die, or nobody cares much. So it's like, why is it that like, you know, for Osama bin Laden or Saddam Hussein or Joe Biden dies, then it's like you wouldn't give a mental fuck, would you? But why is it that when, you know, you die, the thought of your death, well, that's suddenly a different story entirely. So why isn't it just the same? Oh, well, we covered some distance.
Yeah, we
tonight.
better stop it, I guess. That was thanks.
Yeah, we'll have
Thanks,
to go
Hugh.
into survival instinct there, and we'll have to
All
go.
right. Has anybody got any comments or anything?
I have the comment is that if we start to talk about survival, we'll have to go into physical and neurotransmitters and all sorts of other things that are at play that we haven't talked about that, because that's another thing.
So if you do want to keep a note about
Yeah,
if you've got some,
Oh,
and we'll follow it up next. I'd
yeah,
like to pursue it
it's
next
very
week.
animal, it's very basic what I'm talking about, and that's what we're up against too. And we've got other lower layers of the brain that are trying to keep us alive too, that not to do with alien cortex and constructs about the fear of death, but other things that make us run away when there's fire and danger and threats, and that is also at play. But that is also another appreciation.
Can we spend a little bit of time on that next week and just continue it a bit?
Explore that, because it would be interesting.
Okay, yeah. All right then. So we leave it there for this week, you think?
That was so great.
Okay. So then, well, we better give it back to wherever it came from. Then you don't want to make a claim on it or think that you came out ahead. That's a big mistake. If anybody thinks they're getting anything out of these conversations, that's a big mistake. You should be getting absolutely nothing out of them. So let's just consciously give it up in case we feel that we gain something, or we're superior, or we're richer, or better off, or something. It's like, that's a big no. So the way to basically get rid of that delusion is to consciously give up everything that we spoke about, everything we think we thought, we think we gained, think we lost. Just give it all up and just say, in the past, gone, and move ahead without any attachment. And the way to do that is to just consciously fall still, come to the present moment. In the present moment, there is no past. In the present moment, we didn't even have this conversation. If your eyes are closed, you're just listening to the silence. That really is all there is. So listening to that silence, connecting to that silence, we give up all the delusions, all the ideas, notions, thoughts, and feelings that you might have had in the last hour or so, and we give them up with the words Om Paramatmane Namah Iti. Great.
Thanks, Hugh. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
All right.
Thank
Until
you.
next week. Bye.
Bye.